One thing I love in media of all kinds is the relationship dynamic between a character and their character foils. What defines a character foil can be rather loose, and it can be anything from two leader types butting heads, to friendly rivals with differing outlooks, and even a hero and their love interest. From battle tendency to initial D, foils can strengthen a main character's resolve and show what really makes them tick, pushing them to their limits and bettering our hero. And it really bugs me to say this, but Fire Emblem doesn't really have many traditional ones. Let's start by wiping our slate a little clean here. Of the major installments in the Fire Emblem series with multiple lords, I can only really name a few proper foils who aren't antagonists off the top of my head. While the antagonist foils are certainly poignant, hell, you won't ever see me complain about how Arvis and Sigurd's dynamic works. I kinda miss the proper hero and lancer interaction we see time and time again in other media. In the title of this video was any indication, you already know which of the characters on this list we're going to be talking about. So today, let's pull up our chairs and talk a little bit about how Alm makes character foil work.
Except for this, I haven't been outside my village much.
In my honest opinion, good character foil stems from one place, and that is the foil's relationship to the protagonist. Planning a narrative around a protagonist in this way is both the best and worst thing you can do. On the one hand, it illustrates rather easily how every significant action relates back to them, but you of course run the risk of going too soft on the protagonist. Ideally, every major character's perception of the protagonist should web out like a spider web, with a variety of opinions placed on them in a sliding scale. Going too black and white with your other character's opinions of the protagonists creates problems that thankfully Shadows of Valentia avoids. In our case, our centralized protagonist is Alm. While more people become involved as we fan out on the web, it's those who are closest to Alm that I want to look at today, and how each one challenges Alm's ideals and what they all mean for the growth of his character, and hopefully answer the question, what makes a good centralized protagonist, and what makes good foil for them?
Where did he go this time?
What's the matter, Faye? Don't tell me you're after him again.
From the moment Shadows of Valentia starts, we are introduced to Alm's group of friends and given a good idea of what their general dynamic is and how they interact without Alm being present. And this gives us a great idea of how each one of them perceive Alm without him being there. Gray is the de facto leader of the group of kids, for now anyways. He values Alm's friendship, curt about it, but clearly not happy about the thought of Alm growing away from them. Faye has a fixation on Alm, a childhood crush she won't soon grow out of. Cliff says, "Don't waste your time" to Faye, indicating his maturity about the whole situation regarding Celica. And Tobin, bless this man's heart, just really wants to see that night in the woods. By showing us how the other children perceive Alm without Alm being present, it allows us as an audience to make a few conclusions ourselves. Conclusions that are either subverted or enforced once we actually see where Alm and Celica ran off to.
I've just never had any friends my age. So I guess I wasn't used to boys like you.
Well, I'd never met a girl like you either. Don't let it get to you.
Say, why are you so nice to me?
Why? Do I need a reason?
Alm seems genuinely caring for Celica, and it's very clear that they both have feelings from each other even from this brief conversation in the prologue. We can also see the seeds of Alm's defining traits that he will exhibit later in the game sown here. Everything from his reactivity and somewhat short fuse to his genuine desire to help, as well as, most importantly, his own lack of self-confidence and his humility. While each of these traits are fairly harmless now, each of them will end up setting Alm on a different path with one of his immediate circle of friends. The first of which is his reactivity, causing him to go against the wishes of Sir Myson.
Lucas, wait!
What is it?
I'll go. I'll join the Deliverance.
You?
What the hell? You can't do that. Wait, can you do that? I'll admit, you fight like a beast and they'd be lucky to have your sword. But this isn't sparring with your Gramps, Alm. You're volunteering to go to war. I know what it is. And if Grandfather won't do it, then I'll do it for him.
In Act 1 of Shadows of Valentia, from their fight in the beginning after the time skip to the moment when Lucas arrives in Ram Village, we are aware that Mycen is simultaneously Alm's greatest mentor and yet his biggest obstacle. And when Alm chose to set out on his own in Mycen's place once he turned the offer down, joining the Deliverance became monumental for Alm's growth, and it marks the moment where he became autonomous, where the humble village boy who just wants to help finally makes something of himself. The important takeaway here is that Alm's actions were purely reactionary, and they set him on a path that he may not have gone on otherwise. Had Lucas not arrived, or Mycen been more willing to help, Alm may not have left the village, but the promise of something greater, a promise that pleaded to Alm's desire to help, guided his actions all the way to Desay's doorstep. And when Mycen and Alm convene again at Sophia Castle, we can easily see the result of his actions.
I came here to ask you a single question. Are you ready?
Am I ready?
Indeed. For once you march on Rigel, you place yourself in the hands of destiny. You won't be able to stop the events that unfold. No one will wish you well.
While Mycen was certainly important in shaping Alm's worldview and setting him upon this path, there are two characters who influence Alm the most in Echoes, and for the purpose of illustrating their effects on him as best I can, I'll refer to them as Alm's light foil and his dark foil, the former being the all-important Celica. Now, Celica being Alm's light foil brings with it one of Echoes' driving themes, that of human capability versus that of faith. Alm and Celica illustrate this best through their goals on each path, with Celica searching for a way to put things right at a divine level, whereas Alm strives towards a human cause of the mess of Valentia has become. However, this results in one of Echo's biggest hiccups, and that is Alm and Celica's reunion in Act 2. This scene gives me some complex feelings. On the one hand, its opening and resolution are both extremely well done. However, the transition between them is rather clunky. One of Echo's ugliest problems is its tendency to rush certain scenes or arcs to its resolution, with moments fleeting like they were mixing a couple pieces of dialogue here or there. And unfortunately, two of the most pivotal scenes for Alm's development are guilty of this, and this scene is one of them. So how did we go from this?
I'm so glad to see you.
To this.
You stubborn jerk.
Celica.
In my opinion, I think it goes back to something Alm showed in the early days of when he called wreaths dumb, and that is Alm's short fuse. The back end of this conversation, thanks in part to Erica Lindbeck and Kyle McCarley's powerhouse performances, communicates almost all of Alm's previously set up values as Celica struggles to process how Alm has changed. Alm is firm, cold, and duty-bound, yet with his comment about the missing princess, ironically, the woman he's talking to, showing that he maybe hasn't lost that childhood dreamer mentality. The point of this scene is to primarily illustrate Alm and Celica's differing philosophy on conflict, with Celica looking for another way, and Alm taking a more direct path to the source of the problem. These ideals, while separate, coexist from Alm and Celica's mutual respect, and it's really a shame that this isn't developed further. Both of their conversations spend more time establishing their romance than exploring their clashing values in the later acts. And in my opinion, their relationship would have been made stronger if this outburst in Act 2 became the beginning of a growing understanding and makeup process between our two leads, culminating in the best aspects of both their worldviews uniting as they do in the final moments of the game. There is a lot to unpack with Alm and Celica's relationship throughout the entirety of Echoes, but for the interest of keeping this video focused on Alm's primary character foils and not just his relationship with Celica, I think it's best if we save it for another day. That being said, I'll leave you with the moment that I think perfectly embodies the underlying message of what the developers were trying to come across with Alm and Celica's relationship in Echoes. Throughout the game, Celica has represented faith and hope, whilst Alm has represented independence and ambition. And the death of faith at ambition's hand, only for faith to be reborn by ambition, is one hell of a note to end your romantic subplot on.
But I'd never get mad at you.
Why not?
Why not? You sure do like putting me on the spot. Didn't we have a similar conversation years ago?
I suppose we did.
Though, the interesting thing about Witch Celica in Act 5 is that it's not the first time we've seen somebody's romantic interest become an empty husk. And that feeds into the most important rivalry Alm has, which is that with his dark foil, Burcu. In my opinion, this encompasses everything about Alm's previous character interactions, and it builds on them in almost every way possible. Burcu is Alm's perfect antithesis. He got to live with the woman he loves, he got to be raised a noble, and he was given all the freedom he could ever want. As a result, this makes Burcu cocky, petty, and spoiled. And when he is ultimately bested by the more disciplined and ambitious Alm, Burcu's confusion and subsequent rage leads to quite possibly my favorite character dynamic in all of Echoes. To understand what makes Burcu such a huge shakeup for Alm's character, we have to look at the other dynamic shift that occurs in Act 3 of Echoes. As in it, most of Alm's friends are pushed aside and somewhat left behind by the narrative, and this makes for a very poignant piece of storytelling, as the rivalry between Gray, Alm, and Tobin is no longer what matters to Alm. He has an army to lead, and a foe to overcome in the form of Burcu. As Alm achieves more and more as the leader of the Deliverance, we can see his friends from Ram Village be pushed away, echoing their own sentiments about Celica that they had so long ago as children.
Nice to know we're so easily replaced.
Gray, who was always the leader back in Ram Village, now has to play third or even fourth fiddle to Alm and the higher-ups in the Deliverance, as Gray realizes that everything he had over Alm was gone. And Tobin, poor Tobin, who always strived to beat Alm and could barely measure up to Gray, sees his benchmarks pushed further and further away from him with each passing day. With Alm's Ram Village friends being swept aside in Alm's conquest, it is here that we see the full extent of Alm and Burcu's rivalry and how it has consumed both their character arcs. For all they are different, they also share many traits, including, but not limited to, a short fuse, a sense of entitlement, strong convictions to the women in their lives, and lastly, Burcu and Alm just really despise each other. Alm and Burcu's clashes in Act 3 and 4 make up an excellent microcosm of a theme we've already explored with Celica, that of faith versus human ability. The transition Burcu makes from a staunch believer in the strength of mankind on its own to a religious zealot is one of the defining aspects of his rivalry with Alm, as the two of them grow in perfect opposite to each other. Burcu losing faith in his own strength and relying on divine faith instead, whereas Alm gains confidence in his own strength and loses it in that of faith. This will eventually feed into Burcu and Alm's excellent final clash. Burcu is a spoiled brat, to put it simply. He was raised in a life of comfort and groomed as a snob and fed from silver platters. Burcu believes that as the heir to the kingdom, he is not only above the commoners by birthright, but he is ordained to be their superior in every way. Burcu doesn't know how to lose, simply because he's never had to learn. Alm, however, earned everything: Celica's trust, Myson's approval, and the hearts of the Zophian people, and his own strength and resolve. Alm has everything to gain, but Burcu has everything to lose, and lose everything Burcu does. Burcu turns to Duma, revoking what is left of his humanity in exchange for power. His zealotry even results in the death of the one thing he loved most, Renea. And while Alm fought hard to bring his Celica back, Burcu's fighting drove Renea away. Ultimately, it is Alm who prevails, and the scene we get afterwards is intriguing.
Renea? Renea? Is that really you?
Dear proud Burcu, even without crown or throne or castle, you were ever my emperor, a just, right, and noble man.
Like with the Celica scene in Act 2, this one feels like it came a little too soon. It tries far too hard to redeem Burcu's character in the last minutes of it, and when I think that the time would have been better spent reflecting on Alm and Burcu's similar origins and inverse trajectories of life, focusing perhaps on this single line.
You and I are cousins, after all. Family. I didn't think I had any family in this world. And yet, here you are. I know we can be close friends as well. Let's work together, Burcu.
What I love about this is that Alm and Burcu may have turned into close friends due to their similar age and station in the Regalian royal family, but it raises the question, who then would they take after? As much as Alm is of royal blood, he was raised a commoner, lived an unremarkable life until the war, and only really learned of his grand destiny some few in-game days ago. It gets into this greater argument of nature versus nurture, and what determines a child's development. But purely because of Alm's royal blood, I always find myself going back to nature, and thinking about this line over and over again.
What nonsense. One is born either noble or common. This destiny cannot be changed. Has a sheep any hope of leading wolves? No.
Could Gray and Tobin's rivalry have Alm ever stayed competitive? Was Faye always destined to be unrequited? I'm not sure I can answer that, but I'd like to think. Had Alm and Burcu been raised together, the men they became, and the bond they shared would have far closer represented Burcu and Fernand's than Gray and Tobin's. Burcu was right. Nobles of the world will always be better than commoners. But when a person who surpasses you is a more pure-blooded noble, who then is the commoner by comparison?
You kept me waiting, Alm. Or should I say, Your Excellency. Perhaps Emperor Rudolph II of Regal.
As the successor to the Regalian throne, Alm has this honor thrust upon him by his father. Emperor Rudolph's passing is one of Echo's best ludonarrative moments, as Rudolph won't counter Alm when he attacks him in-game, simply waiting for the inevitable. This scene is frankly heartbreaking, as Alm, who has lost his trust in his friends, is unaware of the fate of Celica, and has the blood of an entire empire on his hands, realizes that the monster who started this war was instead Alm's only chance at a normal family.
No, wait! Emperor Rudolph! Were you truly my father? Then I've just... Oh, gods! What have I done?
This moment is fleeting, gut-punching, and recontextualizes every single one of Alm's relationships in one fell swoop. Soon after, we are given the memory prism showing Rudolph entrusting Alm to his friend, Sir Myson. Rudolph knows that the boy bears the brand and is destined for great things, and every step Rudolph took was in service to his son, hoping to one day see the worthy successor to Regal arrive at his very doors. Rudolph committed sacrifice after sacrifice, not because he wanted to, but because he had to. A sentiment his son, through all of his rivalries, through all of his clashing ideals, and through every moment he was challenged throughout Echoes, has kept close to his heart since he began leading the Deliverance.
Myson, I have to draw first blood. I must awaken the people to their potential, their own strength.
My station doesn't matter, Celica. I'm here because I was called. I have a duty to perform, and I'll perform it. No more and no less.
Thank you for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed. This video honestly could have been a lot longer because there is so much about Alm that I'd love to say. But for now, I think I'll have to settle for just talking about how his ideals were constantly challenged throughout Echoes, which I think is probably the strongest aspect of his character, and the one that spoke the most to me. Alm is perhaps my second favorite male lord after Ephraim, who will one day get his time in his son. But for now, if you enjoyed this video, please feel to give it a like, and if you want to see more videos like this, you can go ahead, hop over to my channel page. I have a whole playlist of these types of things, and if you like what you see, even subscribe so that you don't miss any future ones. Anyways, my name is ZerkMonsterHunter 4, and as always, no matter what games you like to play, happy hunting. To think, I almost made this entire video without a single pun.